Rats have been living in human cities for a very, very long time. But despite living with them underfoot for millennia, we know surprisingly little about the science of this wildlife.
We probably know much more about polar bears than we know about rats.
But the Vancouver Rat Project is here to change that.
The Vancouver Rat Project is a interdisciplinary program that was started back in 2011.
The aim was to understand whether rats posed a health risk to residents of the downtown east side. The project started by looking to see which pathogens, disease-causing organisms, Vancouver's rats were carrying. The project found that the rats were carrying various pathogens, but there was a surprising pattern to the pathogens.
These pathogens were unevenly distributed across the downtown east side. So one city block, 60% of the rats could be carrying a bacterial pathogen. Next block over, those rats might not be carrying anything at all. So in phase 2, we really wanted to understand why.
Why were pathogens clustered in rats? What effect did pest control have on pathogen clustering? And what impact did rats have on people? To answer their first question, the project studied rat colonies, groups of closely related individuals that live in close proximity, like an extended family that has all moved into the same block. They wanted to understand how and where rats moved.
We trapped rats in nearly 40 city blocks, and we identified 1,200 pairs of relatives. Only 11 of those pairs were found in different city blocks. To only see 11 of those pairs in different blocks indicates that most of those individuals aren't moving very far.
Because rats stick to a single city block, the pathogens they carry stick to a single city block too.
Roads can actually act as a barrier to movement, especially major roadways, so where there's lots of traffic.
This research shed light onto their surprising finding from phase 1. Rat movement, or rather their lack of movement, appeared to explain why pathogens were clustered by block. Armed with an understanding of where rats and the pathogens they carry were, and why they were clustered, the project wanted to better understand how pest control impacts rats and their associated pathogens.
We had a number of city blocks where we trapped and we tagged rats and saw where they were, who they were. We tested them for different pathogens that can make people sick. And then what we did is in some of those city blocks, we enacted a pest control campaign. So we trapped and we removed rats. At least one of these pathogens, Leptospira interrogans, a bacterial pathogen transmitted among rats and to people through rat urine. When you go in and you remove rats from a block, you can actually increase the number of rats carrying that pathogen.
Exactly why removing rats increases the prevalence of Leptospira is still unclear, but it may have to do with the social structures of rat colonies.
One thing that might happen is pest control might remove the dominant individuals, and the surviving rats then try to establish a new social hierarchy, potentially increasing the amount of infighting between those rats.
Infighting may be the reason why there is an increase in pathogens found in rats. This means that effective rat management isn't as simple as just removing as many rats as possible. Effective strategies need to take into account rat ecology.
We have to look at the levels of the populations themselves.
Without that targeting of the underlying factors that promote rat infestations, we're sort of just putting a band-aid on a wound.
Infectious diseases like Leptospira are associated with rats and a big reason cities try to manage their rat populations.
But people don't seem, here in North America, to get sick with rat-associated pathogens all that often. And so we wanted to understand if there were other health effects of living with rats, specifically impacts on mental health.
To study this, the Vancouver Rat Project interviewed residents of the downtown east side.
What we found is that people were quite negatively affected by living with rats. They experienced anxiety, loss of sleep, fear. So there's this whole other impact of living with rats that we haven't really been considering when it comes to rat mitigation and rat control. So I think we need to reconceptualize how we think about rat-associated risks beyond just the potential diseases that they could carry. The reality is that living in a city, you're going to live with rats. That's it. They're there. Right? They're everywhere. And so understanding rats and their ecology helps us to mitigate some of the potentially negative impacts that rats can have so that we can live with them.
What we're trying to do now in the Vancouver Rat Project is establish how we can take those principles from basic science and ecology and pest control and apply them at the municipal level.
Living with rats is no easy task. But if we want the future of our living with them to look different than our past, we need to learn more about rats and how they live to create smarter, more effective management strategies.